What's up, everybody? Early morning live. It's not really that early, as I've already had to get a lot of work done before this video, which is why I'm a couple minutes late. I apologize about that. But the morning lives, there's just an extra sense of juice, you know? We are not tired at all. It's not in the afternoon during the lull. It's not late at night where we might start getting tired. But we've got the juice today to watch this hearing with a clear mind, a rested mind. At least for some of us, I realize people are watching in all different time zones. Azam's probably going to bed after this video. But I want us to watch this and listen to what the judge says. A lot of you have already watched it. We're going to watch it together and give our comments. It's the hearing on whether or not cameras are going to come into the courtroom for the Brian Kohberger trial, but also the pretrial hearings and basically what we've gotten throughout the case. I'm skipping the beginning part about the interveners and whether or not they have standing to bring this. We'll discuss it, but we're not going to watch 15 minutes of it. And instead, after we watch the hearing, we're going to watch a 15-minute interview between Brian Etten and the Gonsalves family and their attorney and how they feel about cameras in the courtroom, which I think is an interesting juxtaposition and why they had to come out and make their position known. And why wasn't their position made known in court, which I think is a miss and not the way it's supposed to be. And I'll explain why later. Actually, why not just give that nugget right off the top? If the Gonsalves family, as the victims in the case, have a position that is in opposition to the state's position, the state does not represent the victim's family specifically, but they do represent the people of the state, which do include the victim's family. So if you have confidence as a lawyer in your position, and this has happened from time to time, happens in civil cases and private cases and whatever it may be, if you have confidence in your position that it is legally appropriate and is the right decision and you think the judge should rule with you, you shouldn't have a problem stating the opposite position. Many times in motions, you'll hear the defense's position is this while the state's writing an argument, or the defense will say the state's position is this. So why couldn't the state just say, we thought it was important, judge, that you know the victim's position is this? Now, maybe you can add, they don't understand legally how that'll affect the case. And because they're not in all the rooms and privy to all the conversations and decisions, they don't know everything that's going to come out in trial. But what they do know, this is their position. I think it's something the judge should know, and the judge should take that into consideration. But the state didn't do that in this case, at least that I saw or that I've read. All right, so we're going to jump into the hearing. If you guys have not subscribed to our channel, it's like 50% still watch these Kohberger videos and don't subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. It helps me out a lot. We're trying to push towards 300,000 subscribers, which is just mind-blowing. And then hit that like button as well if you haven't already. But let's get to it now. And we're jumping in about 17 minutes into the video because the first motion was technically a motion to intervene, which would allow them to file these motions as the media and to file these motions as the media and to come and have their arguments heard as an intervener, meaning they have certain rights in the case. They have certain rights to be on certain filings in the case and protections and being on notice of certain things that happen in the case. The judge basically said he's not so sure they should be interveners. And he thinks that they might not have quite the standing to get that type of access. But regardless of how he feels about that, he is going to listen to their arguments today, and he will make a decision that he realizes affects the media, affects the public, affects all of that. And so he will listen to their arguments today. Technically, he denied their motion to intervene, so they're not going to have any of those additional rights that an intervener may have. I'm not so sure I agree with the judge, but it may not matter practically. If he's going to listen to their arguments and he's going to make a decision here, that's really what we came to see and to listen to. So let's take a listen to it here. The audio is never the best. It's pumped all the way up. Let me make sure closed captions are turned on. All right. So now we are going to listen to the rest of this hearing together to hear how each side argues, which we already know from the written documents, but to see where the court is, which is the most important part.
That's also going to be you, Mr. Watson.
Sure, I don't intend to take a lot of time. We've briefed this. Moreover, we somewhat argued it a few months back. I think our position is that the court, I think, understands our concerns about turning this into a spectacle, the way that that may prejudice the public against our client, the way in which that dehumanizes people, constellation, and turn this into more of a TV show drama than a court proceeding, which is what it is. And I think everyone understands that.
So And I think it's important, right? The reason I pause it and want to repeat some of the arguments the lawyers make is because when you hear the lawyers make an argument that the judge then reiterates in some questions that he asks and comments that he makes, it means they're on the same page, which is usually good for that lawyer and the arguments that he's making. So he basically said people are trying to turn this into a TV show. And I think everybody knows that at this point. Keep that in mind when we listen to the judge's comments.
Our concern is that since that time, it doesn't seem like much has changed. The media's argument, as far as I can understand it, is that the cameramen that are here are doing their jobs well. There are editors for various organizations, or people on social media that take those images and they do things with them that we may not like. And that if the court removes the cameras, presumably those people will just use older images and we won't have effective things that will fall very far. Our position is that removal of the cameras does two things. One, it stops new images. And I don't think we can underestimate the power of novelty when it comes to what the public is interested in. Use of old pictures becomes ho hum. There's a reason why we live in a world of memes where people are constantly trading around pictures. They quickly get old. There's a new one. It seems like every day there's hundreds of brand new images. So the concept of removing this sort of almost sideshow from what's being put out there, we think would be an important way to kind of take away the sensationalization of this case and just kind of reduce it to hopefully the words on the page. And if they're using old photos, etc., you can't stop them. But we just don't see that as being as big an issue.
So I really like part of this argument. And when I say like, I mean, the way I look at it is he doing a good job of making his point? And where I think he's doing a great job of making his point is not only digging in on what he knows the judge is going to agree with the sensationalization of this and not making it a TV show, but also one of the major arguments from the media that I think is a good argument from them is we've already had so much out there. People are already running with this. People are already hypothesizing and making their decisions. So to cut it off now is going to do more harm than good. And he's combating that argument. Now, whether or not you agree with his argument, it is the right strategic move to take that point from the media and say, Judge, we don't think the stuff of the past, we can't control that. It is what it is, it's already out there. But why make it even worse by continuing to disseminate this information that people are going to twist and sensationalize and turn into a sideshow? So he's hitting that point straight and head on, which is a good point from the media. And I think he does a pretty good job of at least giving the judge an out if the judge is going to make an order, because we have to realize, spoiler alert, the judge reserves ruling, which is what we said was going to happen anyways. But the judge reserves ruling on this. And so he's going to go do a written order, and they're giving him certain things he can use in that written order to explain away the good arguments that the media may make.
Constant stream of new images that are being manipulated, etc., to make viral content, what have you. Our secondary point is just that we don't like where the camera's currently sitting because it looks like where I'm sitting and my laptop. I got one of these fun screens, so that if you look at it from the side, you can't quite see what I'm doing anymore. But it's a distraction for us because we feel like essentially there's a camera right over our shoulder, and we certainly understand they're not zooming in on what we're doing. But I think we've already seen that once they make these images and they pass them around, I mean, they're well-made cameras, and somebody else could presumably do that. And so that causes us quite a bit of concern as well. So if the court decides that removal of the camera isn't necessary, we do have, I think, a bigger concern of just making sure that they're set someplace where we don't have images that are really just what we're working on during the case. And I don't.
So this is the most interesting part. I think most of you know where I stand and where I have felt from the jump, listening to Judge's comments in the past about cameras, looking at Judge Boyce's ruling to remove cameras in the same jurisdiction in a similar type of case, that I've leaned toward cameras getting booted. But I may be wavering. Still probably where I am, but I'm trying to keep the suspense here. And one of the big things that's making me think maybe this is not a slam dunk, cameras are gone, which is where I've been kind of throughout the process. Maybe my dad, Big George, as many of you know him, you've seen him on these videos. I disagree with him often. Often I'm wrong, especially when it comes to things that I think are so logical. And he's like, that's just not how it's done. He's been doing this for literally almost 50 years. Federal, state, prosecutor, defense. I've only been doing it for 10. So 5 times the experience. And what did he say? How does he think it should go? And he said, camera in the back of the courtroom on the wall with almost like a fishbowl view, C-SPAN style, and you're going to hear that mentioned over and over and over again throughout this hearing, that maybe that is the appropriate compromise to get rid of sensationalization, to get rid of potentially seeing attorney-client privilege documents. Maybe we should just put a camera up there at the back of the room. Now, I don't think it handles all the problems and the reasons the media and the public access and the transparency. I don't think it makes it as transparent of a process, but it's better than nothing. I'll agree with you there. And I will say also, the way our country is, most of the people writing the rules and making the rules have a background much closer to my dad than they do me. There's a lot more people with 40 years of experience and 50 years of experience that actually make the rules than people with 10 years of experience. A lot of people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s still making rules in our country. A lot less people in their 30s. So there's a reason. And I do think Judge brings up a lot of good points that I've made on my videos that we're going to listen to, but I just thought I want to point out right from the jump that this is what my dad said should happen and thinks the way the rules should be written with the modern day cameras is do it like C-SPAN or CCTV or whatever it may be. So we still have that access, but not the circus.
I don't have much else to report as far as questions.
I have one comment or question, because in one of your briefs, I know it had two sequences of briefs because we had this earlier, but this was a newer one where you were saying, well, this is a quote, were it only the kind of cameras used to show the workings on the House floor on C-SPAN.
I may be showing an age, but they may have better cameras now, but when I was
Well, I'm sure.
younger, it was just this camera like way over there.
Yeah, well, that's the point. I mean, I made me think about that. Is just plant a camera up there. Everybody can just see what's happening from the back of the courtroom. Maybe that can satisfy everybody just partly.
That was kind of.
And I will say judges and mediators love satisfying everybody partly. Mediators usually say everybody should leave a little upset at the end of this mediation. Shouldn't be a slam dunk home run for either of you. Both of you should be compromising. Judges like to make decisions like that too.
That was my suggestion. I feel like somebody's going to throw it to me anyway, but that I thought might be a way to kind of give a little and just kind of protect what we're trying to protect.
I've never seen anything very sensational on C-SPAN.
And that's literally what I was thinking.
I've never seen anything too sensational on C-SPAN. There's a reason for that, I think.
Got pretty close.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are we going to Mr. Redley now? Ms. Olson gets at the end of that, and then I'll go back to the parties. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. As we previously discussed, the decision of whether to allow cameras in the courtroom is discretionary for the court. The state outlined our concerns with allowing cameras in our responsive brief and in our June 6th briefing. Primarily, those concerns are preserving the right to a fair and impartial trial for all the parties, protecting sensitive witnesses who will testify at hearings and trial in this case, and safeguarding evidence, which is the graphic nature. We agree that the media plays an important role in the court process, and we appreciate in their briefing the measures that they identify to address some of our concerns for protecting vulnerable witnesses or evidence which is of a graphic nature that they've done in previous cases. However, our contention is that the safest way and best way to address all of these concerns is to prohibit cameras in the courtroom, or in the alternative, prohibit cameras when sensitive or vulnerable witnesses are testifying or there's evidence being viewed that's of a graphic nature. I'll stand for questions.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's basically it from the state and the defense, which we already read and we already understood from the pleadings and the papers in the case. Now, the main part of this hearing is the arguments made by the media and the dialogue back and forth between the judge and the media. Maddie, will you tune into the status hearing for Murdoch starting in 15 minutes? What I think I'm going to do is I'll probably do a video on that and either post it tomorrow or go live tomorrow morning or something like that, or maybe even post it this afternoon. I'll record it later. After this video is over, I have appointments, so I'm not going to be able to do a live with it. Thank you, Rebel Duck. Amy also asked, thank you, Amy, unrelated to this case, but have been waiting to catch a live to ask, if Alec Murdaugh gets a new trial, does the financial stuff come in, or the various things the defense open the door for the first trial, or does it start from scratch like it never happened? So the 404B evidence and other bad acts, there'll be a whole new, because Judge Newman ruled that they opened the door to it, that meant it wasn't going to come in the first place, at least some of it, but I think some of it was going to be allowed in. So it goes back to the beginning of the trial. Whatever was allowed in at the beginning of trial will come in. Whatever was opened the door to during that trial will not come in unless the door is opened again. So just because it came in the first trial does not mean it's going to come in the second trial, especially if it's something that they opened the door to during the trial. Nicole, are judges allowed to watch the news about trials that they are working on? Yes, they are allowed to watch the news. Should not affect their ruling or anything like that. Mercy Cat, what do you think of some of the victims' families saying they want cameras and they weren't consulted? I'm gonna save this for later. Alley Cat, I sent you an email. Did you get it? I will look now, Alley Cat, while we continue to watch.
Okay, Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I think, legally, for where we were 3 months ago with respect to what the rule the court has to consider in terms of whether to continue to allow cameras in the courtroom, and that's Idaho Court Administrative Rule 45. And I think, Your Honor, when you read through that rule, it really addresses the concerns that the parties have raised to this court about what the court's discretion is, about what it can, how it can direct cameras, whether to be in the courtroom, all of those things, that it can restrict camera coverage when there is a particularly sensitive witness. And I think, Your Honor, what you saw in the declarations that we submitted, the declaration of Rebecca Boone and the declaration of Grace Long, is that these are journalists who are experienced in covering court cases, and in covering court cases where there are cameras, both video cameras and still cameras, and following the court's admonitions about what can be covered and what can't be done. And I think, particularly, Your Honor, with respect to Ms. Boone's declaration, and Ms. Boone, who's a graduate of the University of Idaho's journalism program, who continues to be an advisor to that program, and who certainly would have not only the best interests of her employer, but she understands this community. I mean, her experience has been that when you have these pool cameras, both still and video, and when you allow camera coverage to the extent that you can, it better serves the public, and it helps ameliorate the kind of media scrum is probably not the term that my clients would want to use, but there's sort of a big gaggle of journalists who accumulate outside of the courtroom when there is no opportunity to be inside the courtroom, when you don't get the opportunity to have that full procedure. So I think the court can use Idaho Court Administrative Rule 45 and craft a solution that continues to allow the journalists who are working hard to cover this case to be able to do so in a way that both allows them to provide really a firsthand account of what's going on. And again, Your Honor, I don't think we can underestimate the importance of that firsthand video account as well, because we're just in this day and age where people are used to seeing things firsthand. There's cameras everywhere. To be able to really have great confidence in the proceedings, I think it's important for the court to allow some sort of in-courtroom camera coverage of the proceedings. People are going to need to be able to see firsthand for themselves how the evidence is presented, how the decision rulings in the court. They can learn a lot from that in a way that they can't learn from people who then are in the courtroom and they're set up outside and they talk about what happened. And so I think, that's a good reason to continue the policy that the court has had. And then I think, Your Honor, with all due respect to Mr. Robinson, I just don't think there are the violations of the things that the court said at the outset of the June 27th hearing. I was not here. I read about it in the attachment that Mr. Lofton made in his initial, or the reference Mr. Lofton made in his initial pleading in this round. And my reading of that, Your Honor.
Just in case anybody's wondering, this is not on 1.5 speed or 2 times speed. She just speaks very quickly, and we will break it up and talk about it. She makes some good points. Some points I think she reiterates a couple times. But I think overall she makes really good points that let the journalists be journalists. We can't control what people do with it outside the courtroom. They're going to do that whether or not there are cameras in the courtroom. Will there be less for them to do? Yes. But there's also going to be less truth coming out, less transparency, less legitimacy, less people. Like, I like to think of myself in this camp, and I'm assuming since you guys are here watching and discussing this with me that you would agree, but real information coming out, not something that's been reported to me, and us being able to talk about it and learn about the judicial system, which is the point of the media, which we talked about in depth on our podcast when we talked about the media rights. We're going to talk about a different podcast episode near the end that I think you should watch after this hearing. But honestly, I think that they make really good points that what happens in the courtroom and live streaming it with cameras and having journalists able to go back and watch and make sure their stories are correct. Because here's the other thing. not to the fault of some of these journalists. They may hear some legal jargon or a ruling the judge made, misinterpret it, and then they've got to go report and write on it before the written order's out. They're not lawyers. They're journalists. So they may have an honest mistake, but if they had the video or the audio they could go back and listen to again, they would make sure they got it right. So there is a lot of positive to the arguments she's making.
Actually, the Fox News story is that the court said, and of course the court said it, so I'm sure the court's memory of it is the best, but that the court made a comment that the court should, or something, a hard time.
Back up. That's one of the things I said.
Yeah, okay.
It was just focusing
Right.
too much in particular areas, and so I was just cautioning the media to step back, and they have pushed the envelope.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Okay.
So he has already made the decision that the media has pushed the envelope. He gave them a chance. He gave them a warning. We all heard that. He said he's going to reserve ruling. And what have they done but pushed the envelope? So he already feels like there's been some wrongdoing and overstepping by the media.
You know, I think that what the media heard on that occasion, as reported by Fox News, was that the cameras needed to show a wide shot of the courtroom and not focus strictly on Mr. Kohberger. And I think that phrase focus strictly on Mr. Kohberger has clearly been interpreted to mean you can still take pictures of Mr. Kohberger, but he's not the only one you should be taking pictures of. And there's certainly a limitation in print media or the online stories. I mean, you don't always have video. So what I've seen, and I think that this example you provided to the court, where there were pictures of lots of different participants in the courtroom, and they're trying to show everybody. And if the direction from the court is instead, look, there can be no single pictures of Mr. Kohberger, the challenge is, and I think even Rule 45 says this, there are some limits on how much the court can tell the editors and everything, because they're not here in the courtroom, and some of those people may still choose to crop out just a little bit of that picture. And Your Honor, I don't think that runs afoul of what the court has in mind. I think that what you've seen is an attempt by the journalists who are here in court to show a wider shot. And then as we wrote in our brief, from that courtroom angle there, I mean, it's I think I said it's not a football field. It's hard to get sort of the full perspective when the camera is sitting right there. If there's a way to station the camera at the very back of the courtroom, maybe, but those are also the things, like you saw this in this one declaration. The court TV people have a lot of experience working with courts and trying to find the best way to both serve the purpose of having cameras in the courtroom and being able to present to the public.
Do you think the judge agrees with that? That the court TV people know how to do this because they're professionals?
Proceedings as they occur, and also not be obtrusive, not cause noise, not run afoul of the court's admonition to focus in on any particular individual. So they are more than willing to work with the court to do that. They just have to continue to be in the courtroom, because I think when we look at the full media coverage, they have run afoul of that admonition. There are certainly still individual pictures of Mr. Kohberger, but that will continue to happen regardless, Your Honor.
Well, sure. I mean, in some ways, it kind of misses the point, because it's the sensationalist sort of spectacle that is concerning. And from one of your, the declaration from TV, Court TV. I looked through, all the cases that they filmed, and some of those you could question whether that was a very dignified way to have a trial. And the classic is O.J. Simpson. So they're saying, oh, this is great. This is great work we did, filming this. But if anybody watched any part of that case, it was a circus.
So, interesting. When I heard this, do you guys agree or disagree with him? Agree or disagree that comparing this case to O.J. Simpson's case is fair? That case was a circus. We don't want this case to be a circus. The reason that I disagree with the analogy and the argument I would have made if I was her is we had very different lawyers and clients in that case, Judge. The defense lawyers in that case wanted cameras. The defense lawyers in that case wanted the circus. They wanted it to be sensationalized. The client in that case was a celebrity, even a somewhat of an actor. And to me, the circus nature of it was very different than the parties and the lawyers we have in this case, who don't really want cameras, don't want it to be sensationalized. Additionally, imagine if there were no cameras. We don't know if the cameras affected the result, but imagine there were no cameras and it comes back with not guilty. I think people would have questions. I think there would be speculation on both sides, whether the jury got it right or whether they got it wrong. With cameras on the trial, we have the same questions. Did the jury get it right? Did the jury get it wrong? Having cameras or not having cameras does not eliminate speculation, does not eliminate people questioning the jury system. It does not eliminate problems either way. But what it does do is allows people objective truth to start with. What was said and what happened in the courtroom. Then we can discuss from there on out. That's why we have a country of debates and votes and disagreements. Respectful disagreements, hopefully. Because we're not always going to see things the same way. But it's very different than if we just hear it from one person's mouth or one person's pen, and we only get their view. We don't get to actually watch and see what happens with this transparency and then make our own decision and arguments about what we think, realizing we're not going to change the world. We're not going to change the process. If I disagree with the outcome of a trial, I know that that's not going to flip the outcome. But at least I know in my mind what happened and what I think. And if I ever come across this, that's something I'm going to guard against. And I'm going to start looking for that in other cases. Do we have a similar problem that continues to happen in every case? The only way we ever know that is with cameras in the courtroom. So I think it's very different than the OJ case. And that's kind of I would have blown that point up because he kind of gave you a softball. And you can show how cameras actually did help OJ. I shouldn't say help OJ, helped the OJ case with transparency, and how the sensationalist circus was different in that case than it would be here. It's going to be a circus either way. Lori Vallow Daybell stuff has not gone away just because they took cameras out. And maybe it lessened, but it hasn't gone away.
So that is one of the concerns. In this particular case, we have a lot of interest, and we have a lot of people that you can't control, that your clients can't control, and they are putting out stuff that is harmful. It's harmful for the case, for this case, for the process to have a dignified trial. That's my worry, and that's my job. So Matt just said check playback speed. So let's see here. Oh, well, maybe that's why she sounded so fast. It was on 125. Because I watched it on 2x speed. I thought I put it down to normal, but I put it on 125. Thank you, Matt. So at least the last 12 minutes will be normal speed. Paula, welcome. Debbie, great question. Do prosecutors always want cameras? Have you known the prosecution to not want cameras? My experience has been they never want cameras. Prosecutors, regardless of what anybody says, they come into the courtroom with the upper hand, all the cards, all the leverage, all the resources, and they usually win. So why would you want to add in a factor that's uncontrollable, that you don't know what people are going to think, you don't know what the public's going to think? You want to come do your job with nobody commenting on it and usually win. And if you lose, you lose. So prosecutors almost never want cameras, in my experience. Almost never. Chief Shenanigation Officer, welcome. When I have been talking to the media, just kind of, can you back off a little bit? Because I've been very accommodating, and I just start feeling like, can I really trust them to do the right thing? And it's not necessarily the camera people, okay? It's where that film goes and how it is manipulated and how people are, commentators, how they talk about it, okay?
So the interesting part about this is, and again, we talked about how they're going to compare what happens in the courtroom with out of the courtroom, is you don't have control over other people's free speech, right? And for their ability to discuss this case. And so to give them the truth of what actually happens in court. Now, that's why poisoning the jury pool is the better example, because nobody wants that. But to say that we don't want people talking about it a certain way after, I want everybody to be respectful. We've talked about this a ton. But so should we just close off the political process as well? Should we not live stream the debates because we don't want people to take those and twist those? Should the president never speak publicly because we don't want people to take what he says and twist it? When there's war, should we not have reporting on the war because we don't want people to take it and twist what was said? That's a dangerous kind of thought process to me, taking information out of the people in a free country's hands because we don't like what they say about it. Now, if we can't protect a jury pool and get fair and unbiased jurors in there, then that's a legitimate argument. And I think that's really what we need to focus on, the defendant's right to a fair trial. And that's the podcast I'm going to plug at the end of the video. But to me, that's the point, not how people talk about it outside those walls. I don't like that argument. It doesn't sit well with me.
How they explain it. And a lot of times it is not very accurate. And I don't watch all this stuff, but I've watched enough to see that how disinformation, misinformation is pumped out there along with the images and with the films. So how do we deal with that?
So how do we deal with it? How do we deal with people being wrong? He said just sometimes it's inaccurate. And you know what's funny? So I'm a lawyer. You guys know that. And I talk about a lot how we file motions. One side files a motion. The other side files a motion. If we agreed, we wouldn't need a judge. We need a judge. And every single time, do you know what a judge says? To one of the lawyers that knows more about the case than anybody, than you or I or anybody watching or any reporter in the courtroom, you know what the judge says to one of those lawyers every time? You're wrong. Your argument on whether or not this evidence is admissible, you're wrong. On whether or not this is discoverable, you're wrong. On whether or not we can talk about this DNA evidence, you're wrong. And what he says to the other side is, you're right, you're right, you're right, because one side has to win. But we don't stop lawyers from being able to make arguments and discuss stuff because the judge thinks they're wrong once in a while. Because sometimes judges are wrong. That's why we have appellate courts. And my point is, not that people should be spreading misinformation or disinformation, as we discussed yesterday, the difference between those. But that if people discuss it openly and we have the hearing to, like I'm sitting here, we're watching this together. It very easily, and some of you probably are because you're very smart and you think about things, and some of you like discussion and argument. Some of you are thinking, no, I don't agree with you. He's right about the OJ case. It was a circus. Court TV makes a circus, and this case is going to be a circus. And that's fine. Let's have that discussion. You might actually be right. But we're watching it together. I'm not just telling you what the judge said. We're listening to what the judge says. Big difference to me. And people are going to be wrong about how they see things. If people could just be right all the time, that'd be great, right? It wouldn't be maybe as fun, but we wouldn't have misinformation.
It's not the same media now than it was.
John, people are asking for the podcast link. So go ahead and throw the podcast link in here. I'm going to throw it in again at the end when I talk about specifically how it relates to this hearing. But we'll throw the podcast link where we talk about, it's all about media in the courtroom. So Trial by Media, Fair or Foul is what the series is called. I think there's 6 or 7 episodes up already. There was another question here I wanted to answer, but now I missed it. I'm going to back it up just a little because he starts talking about how it's a different media today than it was 10 years ago. Is that good or bad? He definitely thinks the old media is better. What do you guys think? Do you think just old mainstream media is better 10 years ago than it is today? How we do things with social media and mainstream media together?
With the films. So how do we deal with that? It's not the same media now than it was 10 years ago with social media, for example. I can't control that. You can't control that. I understand that. I mean, it's going to happen anyway. All I wish is that everybody had a little more respect for what we're doing here, because it's not entertainment. It's a tragedy.
I really, really like this judge. And I think it's important, especially if I disagree with some of the stuff that he says. I'm sure he would disagree a lot with what I say. But he is being thoughtful about it. And the core policy of how he's looking at this is right, that this is not entertainment. This is a tragedy. And we need a fair, dignified, respectful trial and respectful, unbiased jurors. And so I think at the core, he's coming at it from the right spot. But I think some things may be affecting his judgment in a way that might make him remove cameras that I think maybe if we thought through it a little bit more, we realize that in our judicial system, they are important and I think necessary in most cases.
Issue, okay? And that is what is disturbing to me personally.
Your Honor, if I may, I understand all of that completely. I have been in Mr. Thompson's shoes in a very disturbing, heinous murder case with a lot of the pressures that go with that and dealing with victims and victims' families. And that is a very challenging position to be in. And being able to, I think, Your Honor, having worked in the criminal justice system far longer than I've been in the position I'm in now, I think that in this media day and age, having cameras in the courtroom so that people can see what the proceedings are all about. And so there's at least a source out there that says, this is what happened. And if there was not that, that makes it much easier for the people who are going to disseminate disinformation, for the talking heads who aren't going to be respectful of the process to do that. Because then there's none of the actual footage from the trial that responsible media outlets and responsible consumers of information and responsible online people will be able to get access to. I think, Your Honor, the answer is not less sunshine, it's more. I don't think we can afford to abandon to whoever the guy on X or Twitter was that cut out a portion of one photograph of Mr. Kohberger and then was glad that he got some call out by Mr. Logsdon in his motion. I don't think we can afford to abandon how this case is portrayed visually to those individuals. And instead, frankly, of having pictures in the court, then you just get all the pictures of people going, in and out of the courthouse. But you're going to have the same content, Your Honor. The way to battle misinformation is to provide the accurate information. And the accurate information is what happens inside this courtroom with the cameras positioned in a place that provides the best, most overall perspective of the courtroom. And if there are sensitive witnesses, then the court can give direction and the media will follow that you don't get to film those witnesses. The rule provides you don't get to film the jurors. There are all sorts of sensitivities built into ICAR 45, and the media would ask the court to use those tools rather than saying, we are not going to allow cameras in the courtroom, we're not going to allow video in the courtroom, because then you just don't get that accurate picture that they can portray out there. And Your Honor, I do think, with all due respect to the comments that Mr. Logsdon made in his reply brief, the members of the media who are in this coalition, who I think are covering this trial, who I think includes the news editor from the Daily Argonaut from the student district at the university, they are here because they think it's an important public service to cover the proceedings in a criminal matter of such importance to the university, to this community, and I think, Your Honor, really to the state of Idaho. And as I recall from my comments when we were here in June, this case has affected people all over the state. There are young people who were students at the university that I know who were affected by what happened. And having some ability to understand the proceedings and to get the closure will be important to them, Your Honor. And I think this court, this court accomplishes much more by allowing the cameras to stay in the courtroom and giving them firm guidance and working with them than it does to send them outside. If you want to see spectacle, see the 40 cameras set up outside of the courtroom, and every time someone walks out, they sort of get ganged up on. That, I think, Your Honor, is spectacle. With respect to the O.J. Simpson trial, which was, I think, one of the first sort of highly covered ones, I think the point of that one was to, look, you can have camera coverage of these cases, and the person, it's still possible for them to get acquittal. It's not prejudicial in terms of guilt or innocence to have cameras in the courtroom. But I think everybody learned a lot.
This is a moment that the judge references later that you can still get acquittals even with cameras in the courtroom. SC, good morning, Uhtred. Thanks for the live. Could the legislature help with more standards when it comes to angles, numbers of cameras, etc.? Yes, the legislature could absolutely help with writing more strict rules of whether or not cameras are allowed, where they're allowed, what they're allowed to do, so that they can take some of the judicial discretion out of it, which I think can make it more uniform. But will they want to do that? I don't know. Maggie said, no cameras equals worse. Conspiracy theories, thoughts. Let her know what you think in the chat. I think it's possible. Aunt Nancy, Peter, can you do a poll of full transparency with cameras versus limited cameras? Well, I can tell you the answer to our poll yesterday or the other day was like 94% said yes to cameras and 6% said no to cameras. So this chat overwhelmingly thinks cameras should be in the courtroom for this case. Kayla, since he decided to reserve ruling, will he watch the media regarding the family's wishes to have the cameras? Do you think he will consider that? I think he can. I don't know if he will. I think he should consider the family's position on it. And I don't think it would change his mind, though. I don't. I think he's probably got his mind made up at this point. Meh. What I like about the live stream is that reading about the case in the news is so biased. When I was watching the Depp case and read the news about it in Norway, I was shocked at their angle of it. And you only knew that because of the cameras, in my opinion. Mercy Cat, what do you think of some of the victims' families saying, whoops, sorry, I wanted to hold that one. We'll go this, Mercy Cat. When mainstream media has already convicted, you need cameras. When they've already acquitted, I think you need cameras sometimes. When they make the decision before the trial, we need cameras.
From that trial. It certainly didn't reflect well on poor Judge Ito. It didn't really reflect very well on the prosecutors. There are things that may have been playing to the camera because of that, but I think we all learned a lot from that, Your Honor, and hopefully, changes can be made about where the cameras can be positioned. And there's part of it's the responsibility of the participants in the courtroom, not to adjust their behavior for the cameras. I don't see, Bill Thompson, the late Cobb County prosecutor, years and years and years adjusting his approach, or Mr. Nye, or the others who are working on this, because there are cameras in the courtroom. I know Ms. Nassoff, I don't know these lawyers as well. I know Ms. Nassoff is not going to adjust her performance in the courtroom. She's going to do everything she can for that client, and I trust these lawyers will too, regardless of whether there are cameras in the courtroom. And I think, Your Honor, the public and this community will be best served by having those cameras in the courtroom and making sure that the guidelines that the court wants to put in place are there, and that there's a firm understanding by members of the media that they will follow that. And I just think it's just not true that these are met with the people who we represent and the people who are in this courtroom today are here to make a spectacle of this proceeding. Thank you, Your Honor.
There are certainly some people that are trying to make a spectacle of it. No doubt about it. Certain people that are trying to turn it into entertainment. No doubt about it. But does that mean you just cut off the transparency, the understanding and learning of the legal process, the confidence in the verdict that the community should have at the end of the trial? That's what the judge has to balance.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. So I just I hope I sent out a message to the media and everybody else that please have patience, be respectful, and be decent. That's what I. So, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, any response to any of that, Mr. Logsdon?
He's like, you don't have to.
You don't have to.
I guess not really sure where to go with that one, but obviously nobody's talking about throwing the media out of the courtroom or making the case go dark. I wouldn't want that. After all, I think the public definitely plays a very big role in making sure that we all do our jobs right.
So what he means is he's okay with media members being there and reporting on it, just not cameras, because he doesn't want the courtroom to go dark. Just interesting.
We're just talking about the images that are coming out of this. Sounds like the court, here's where we're coming from. I don't think I have a whole lot more to add to that. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Redley?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Well, thank you all. I think it's a very interesting, really kind of powerful issue that is a benefit and also potentially a harm. And that there's a lot of balancing that will go into this consideration. Of course, I am especially sensitive to the parties of the case. I saw Mr. Thompson trying to smile a little bit about, there were in a lot of these cases where they were sensationalized and heavily filmed and talked about. The defendants were acquitted. And so therefore that proves that they got a fair trial. Well, we want trials to be balanced.
I don't think that, I could be wrong. I don't think that's what she was saying. I think she was saying like all defendants who usually are the ones saying I don't get a fair trial if the media is here, they can't say that because sometimes it is an acquittal. I think that's more of what she was saying. He's saying the acquittal proves it was a fair trial, and I agree with him. That's not true. If that is what she's saying, that's not true. It doesn't mean it was a fair trial just because there was an acquittal.
For both sides. And I don't know if I was reading your mind a little bit about that, Mr. Thompson, but it can tilt. It can tilt a case one way or the other. If the media is, well, trying the case in the media. And we
Trial
don't
by
want
media.
that because that's not based on evidence. That's not based on the rules of the court. And it can get out of control. And I think some of those cases that were cited in the declaration of court TV personnel are kind of seeing it one way. And they have a certain job to do. I understand that. But some of those cases, in my opinion, kind of spun out of control.
Seems like he has not liked the coverage and the streaming of other cases that he's seen on court TV and otherwise. So that's where you start to really get his lean.
And that based on the media and how heavily it was covered. So that's my worry. I'm going to figure it out and try to do the right thing for both the public and the parties and the rule of law. So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
So he's going to try to do the right thing for the parties, the public, and the rule of law. Now, in case anyone doesn't know, major cap tipping that he is going to remove cameras from the courtroom. Most of the comments he said have kind of led to that, and he's giving his reasoning. He doesn't want it to be a circus. He doesn't want it to be sensationalized. He doesn't want people talking about it and twisting what's happening in this courtroom. He doesn't want a biased jury. He doesn't want an unfair trial for the defendant. Okay? But there's just a glimmer of hope that he says, let's put one camera back there that can see the courtroom, one microphone, or maybe it'll use the court system microphone, and we're going to release it on delay like we've been doing already, and we think that serves all the purposes. So there's just a glimmer of hope that he may do that, while the majority of what he's been saying has shown cameras are going to be out, just like Valo Daybell, just like Judge Boyce. I would expect him to quote that order if he does remove cameras. And what's interesting, Sleuthy Goosey makes a good point here. So the defense gets up and says, I don't want the media out of the courtroom. They can sit back there basically and report on it, but just not cameras. Yet the problem has been with the reporting and the convicting Brian Kohberger in the court of public opinion before we actually have trial. And do we really think that an old picture that the media uses, or even a sketch from a sketch artist that the media uses and posts with their story, do we really think people on Twitter and TikTok and wherever, YouTube, can't use that and twist it and make a meme off of it? Because they can, and they will, and we've seen it. So what are we really protecting? Except the unfiltered truth coming out of the courtroom. So, Mercy Cat. Finally, I can get to this one. What do I think of the victims' families saying they want cameras and they weren't consulted? Well, instead of just reporting what the victims' family said, let's listen to it together after I hit a couple of these other comments. Rebel Duck. Nicole hit a home run again. Face blue smiling. I think that's like an emoji or something. She's the best. She sent a very encouraging message to me this morning, and I always appreciate that as well, Nicole. D-Trug. There's two arguments here. Media wants cameras to report on trial. Public wants cameras because they don't trust the media reporting. It's great. I like that juxtaposition, D-Trug. I like that. That's good. Can he make his own rule for cameras in the courtroom? Yes. As long as he's balancing the interests of everybody involved. Like, yes, we want to have public access. No, we don't want sensationalized reporting. So we're going to put the camera back there. Yes, he can make that rule, even though there's no rule that says only one camera in the back of the courtroom. He can make that a rule for this case in this courtroom. Alley Cat, yes, I did receive the email. I appreciate it. No harm, no foul, no sweat. All is forgiven. I like input from everybody and keep me on my toes. So I appreciate that always. Okay, let's get to this Brian Enton interview here. And I am going to kick this one up a little bit. I didn't realize how long we've been talking. So I'm going to kick this one up just a little bit with the speed. And let's watch this together. So bottom is Gonsalves's father. Top left is Shannon Gray, the victim's family's lawyer. And top right is Brian Enton, who's doing the interview.
That cameras all the community needs to determine who this individual is. You cannot ask for the community to do the death penalty without their vision, without their support, without their understanding of all the aspects of the case. It's more than just the jury members. It's the community. It's a message for everybody to understand. In Idaho, this is how we work. We're not the same as Chicago. We're not the same as Miami and New York and LA. This is how Idaho perceives a major incident, and this is how we react to it. And we have the resources to do that. So I don't know what removing the cameras really provides other than a gap. You know, and we've had a gag order in this case, and that didn't work out well. You know, you hear about other people who've been placed under a gag order. It doesn't seem that the Constitution works well with this constitutional time of when it's okay to speak about, I don't know, I don't want to say the truth, but I want to say when people are going to speak about a case and let the audience decide what the truth is, you know.
So people are saying he only speaks for one of the victims' families. I agree. The Gonsalves family is who he speaks for. I thought Shannon Gray represented two of the victims' families at some point, but whatever. At this point, Gonsalves family, they are a victim in the case, and their opinion is important and something that should be taken into account by the state attorney. So everything I said off the top applies to the Gonsalves family. Not to say they speak for all the victims. And if the other victims have a different point of view, I think they should be heard and explained by the state as well to the judge.
Gag order is an old version of controlling the narrative. You can't control it anymore with, you know, social media, TikToks, and, you know, like I've said before, it's not NBC, ABC, and these three medias that control this narrative. The whole world sees everything. So pretending like you can control, and what are you trying to control? Are we just displaying truth in action? To me, the courtroom is truth in action. So why do we hide that?
Were you surprised, Steve, to see the prosecution also now say that they don't want cameras?
I want to say yes, but I'm shocked at how many times the prosecution and the defendant are on the same page. And then there's some certain things that they have in common, and they rise up. They rise up over and over and over. I won't say them now, but if they keep rising up over my daughter's truth and justice, then I will just call them out on those commonalities that they have.
So the only commonalities that I've seen between the prosecution and the defense so far is gag order, no cameras, and then continuing the trial. I haven't seen a lot of commonality outside of that. And those are three factors that I would say the defense and the prosecution are on the same page in the vast majority of cases. Not all, but the vast majority. Now, maybe he knows more. And again, you'll see throughout this interview, the relationship is anything but good and friendly between the Gonsalves family and the prosecutors. I don't know whether lawsuits are coming. I don't know whether they're waiting to see what the outcome of the trial is before they do anything, but it is not going well between the two. He is tipping his cap a little to think, oh, there's more we don't know about. And I hate that. I hate that. I hate when anybody in my life says, oh, if only you knew it all. It's like, well, then why don't you tell me? It's like, why is it a secret?
And I mean, I just want a camera. I just want the truth. I just want everyone to see what's going on. That makes me radical. Okay, I'll live with that.
Shannon, does it matter what the families think in the eyes of the court? I mean, I've seen the filings from the prosecution, defense, the media. Like, does the family have a say when it comes to the cameras?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I can't speak for the prosecution in this case or the defense
He needs to be very careful based on the gag order and the hearings that have already happened. And he is very careful with his statements.
in any way. As an experience, as a prosecutor, as a former prosecutor, and we always listen to the victims. A lot of times the victims have an opportunity to speak to us about resolutions, how the case might be resolved, certain things that go on during the case, we want them involved in along those lines. And so I think that's part of the family putting out the statement today, was to voice their opinion about what they thought about having cameras in the courtroom, and hoping that people were listening to what they were saying. So I can't speak to the prosecution or the defense and what they might be thinking. So
In your role representing the families, does the prosecution come to you like with situations like this and say, what does the family think about cameras?
well, we were always hopeful.
You see the snark and the smirk, like the prosecutors are not involving them at all. And that happens. Okay. I'm not going to say, I almost said that's true, but I don't know what's happening in this case, but that absolutely happens in cases that I've represented people as well that are victims in criminal cases, and the prosecutors doesn't want anything to do with it. They don't want to talk to them. They don't want to talk to their lawyer. They get annoyed with it in the process. Not always, but it seems to be happening here, which I don't understand. Like, what's the point? I realize some people can be frustrating or even annoying when they're in the Gonsalves's position, but realizing it's an impossible position to be in. You wouldn't want your worst enemy to be in the position that the Gonsalves family is in. So you deal with it and you be understanding. Same thing I said with Sarah Boone the other day. Like, lawyers are in difficult positions all the time. It's part of the job. We have to deal with it. So sometimes you have to deal with people being a little overbearing or demanding, and try to do your best to comfort them. You're not going to be able to be perfect, but just to stop involving them in the process, I don't think is right either.
But I think that's the reason we put out the statement today. I think if we had been approached or asked in some way about that, at least the Gonsalves family, I'm not sure they contacted. I don't know. I can't speak to see if they've contacted any of the other families. I don't think they contacted the Cornudo family or the Mogans about the courtroom cameras in the courtroom, but they did not contact the Gonsalves family through me to ask us what our opinion was. And the family stressed to me that they thought it was an important thing that the world know and people know what they thought about it. And that they thought it was important that cameras be in the courtroom. And so that's why the statement was put out by the family, to let people know what their thoughts were.
In the statement, Steve, it says that the case is surrounded by secrecy.
So they felt the only way really to get it out there publicly was to release this statement, because as far as I heard, and I've listened to it twice now, and you guys have probably listened to it once or twice, I didn't hear anybody mention what the victims' families wanted in that hearing. So that's frustrating. And I commend them from having a public statement so that the world can at least know where the victims stand on this. People want to know that. People are questioning that. People have been saying, like, remember, this is about the victims and their families as well. It's not just all about Brian Kohberger. And I think the prosecution would agree with that, and the judge would agree with that. Yet we didn't hear from them at all. And a very important part of this case.
Can you elaborate on that a little more? Like what you guys meant by that?
I've talked with multiple family members, and I want to be respectful for everybody's viewpoint. And there is some fear that the cameras will record things that are gross. They're not ready to have their friends and family members come to them and say, hey, did you hear about this or that? And I understand that. I really do. So they come to me, and I reflect what they're saying. I absorb it, and then I also tell them from a legal perspective, from my lawyer counsel, it's hard to really argue what a camera is going to be in a courtroom negatively. Like, we're here asking for somebody in the community to judge this individual. So let's just hang it out there. Let's show every aspect and every fact that I feel is a fact. The community should agree that that is a fact, whether it's DNA or whatever it is. So, but I still respect all these family members and their own individual processing of their preparedness for what's about to happen. And it's terrible. You really cannot prepare yourself to understand that the legal system is going to drag all of us through the mud. And that's the only way you can get to the truth. So if I'm going to go through the mud, I'd rather have all the witnesses that I can possibly have than to create a narrow bubble there in Latal County and Moscow and say that, I want to have the support of everyone, that the justice was put in place and the evidence was that clear.
I'm thinking about, them wanting to tear the house down, the university, and sort of the fight over that. And now not wanting cameras, and the prosecution also not wanting cameras. And they gave their legal arguments, which, I guess makes sense in one way, that witnesses might be scared to testify with cameras rolling, especially like emotional witnesses. But I'm also wondering, like, do you think any of this is connected? Like, without cameras, the story sort of goes away. The town doesn't look as bad. Without the house, you don't have to think about it every day. The school can go back to normal. Like, do you think it's all connected, or do you think it really is just sort of legal? Like, both sides just don't want the cameras for the legal reasons?
100%. The reason I'm talking to you right here, right now, is because there is capital business decisions being made on top of justice systems.
So this is interesting. This is something I haven't really thought of, but basically they're saying like they wanted it to go away quietly as to not affect the dollar and bottom line to certain businesses and universities and maybe the state. Interesting. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I agree with that, but it's his point to make.
So no, there is no way to pretend like these all equal and they all equate to the same motivation. Somebody's going to lose, and it isn't going to be my daughter. I will sit here. I will speak to every single microphone, every single camera before I go to court and after I go to court. If you force me to do it, I'd rather the courtroom speak for itself than me. I don't want to speak. I'm actually quite a private man. But if you force me to protect my daughter, then I will speak at every moment that I have to do just that and protect her. And that's what we're doing today. We're protecting the truth. We're protecting where the truth is going to go. The truth needs to be in that courtroom, and a camera will never, ever hide the truth. So why remove it? Why do you remove a camera? Well, maybe it'll protect you from, like me, I misspoke. I might say something wrong, but I'm a father. I can deal with that. The repercussions of that is fine. But some people seem to be scared of the repercussion of their mistake. And I say, just embrace it and let the community decide what the truth is.
So that seems like a statement made to the prosecutor that they're scared of the repercussions of their mistakes or law enforcement or something like that. I don't know how much to read into that, but seems like he's got something behind that.
We either got the guy or we don't. It's pretty simple.
We either got the guy or we don't. So that's him keeping an open mind at this point, right? Because he hasn't been convicted yet. But more on his thoughts about Brian Kohberger in about a minute.
Yeah. And just a few more questions. Since Kohberger waived the speedy trial, I think we all thought maybe the trial was going to be really soon, and now it could be far away. I mean, how are you dealing with that? Are you still processing that? I mean, I feel for you guys having to like continue to live in this weird like legal limbo.
You give up all your notions of normal when something like this happens. And you hope that your community feels for you and embraces you, hugs you, and says, we're going to take care of this. You hope that your community says, we're here for you and we're going to make this right. And that's why I'm there, for them to have the vision and the cameras, and everybody needs to be in that room, because they're the ones that are wrapping their arms around me, Chrissy, and our children. They're saying, we're going to do, like, this is an outsider. He came here to hunt these dumb hillbillies and teach us about what he said was like cloud computing and forensic. He thought he could come here and hunt dumb hillbillies. And
seems like reading into a little bit that he might think it was Brian Kohberger, right? With the cloud computing and killing hillbillies or whatever, and an outsider coming in. So understandable, right? From the victim's dad. I get it. But overall point, cameras in the courtroom, I do think is part of transparency. So this is showing his hand a little that he does think it was Brian Kohberger, which I don't fault him for, especially if he's been listening to law enforcement, talking to them, and they think they have the guy, and he's seen more evidence than we have probably.
He could get away with this. And now that we have him caught, we need to be able to hold him accountable, and the community needs to be a part of that. And taking cameras out of there makes it a double standard. You can
It's almost like he thinks it was Brian Kohberger, so he wants him to be convicted. And if he's not convicted, he wants to know how the state screwed up and maybe point to that as why he wasn't convicted, which I'm reading into a lot right there. But even if you disagree with that, it's not a good reason to remove cameras, right? Because if there is a screw up or an issue that happens in the trial, it shouldn't be hidden. Not to say that there will be, but if there is, that's not a good reason to get rid of cameras.
Can't say that they're accountable, yet they're not a part of it.
How are you? I mean, how are you guys doing? Like, I mean, the last time I saw you in court, Olivia was there with your granddaughter. I mean, how are they doing? I'm sure in some ways, like life has to go on. You have some positive things happening too with your granddaughter. Like how's everybody doing?
In some ways, we're in a pause of a movie. Like you can just go forward, but you just got to keep rewinding because you don't know what you missed and all these facts. So it's no way to live. It's no way to be. And we try to treat our children different than what we're going through. It's my responsibility to hold this individual accountable for what he's done to my family. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm talking. That's why
Again, hold this individual accountable for what he's done to my family. I mean, before he said either we got the guy or we don't. So he's trying his best, I think, to remain objective, but
this is happening right here, right now. It's not because I care about anything other than justice. And that's why I'm pushing for cameras. That's why I'm pushing for this, because I'm a biased man. I'm a biased father. So
there you go.
Let everybody have a part in this. And then it's a lot easier for us to have a conviction that we all embrace. And then the rest of me and my family don't have to hear the haunting effects of messages saying that, you know, if there would have been cameras in that courtroom, it would have been a different outcome. You know, if we would have had truth and transparency.
It's true there. I mean, you never want that shoulda, coulda, woulda if things would have been different, right? You don't want that if you're him. And maybe he thinks cameras in the courtroom are going to help the prosecution, and cameras in the courtroom will further convict Kohberger before the trial starts. So maybe he's coming at it from that point, but I think he's being honest. He said, I'm a biased father. So, but I still think his opinion matters.
Transparency in this case, if it wasn't all about business, then there would have been a different outcome. So you only have one moment to make a statement, and that's the moment we're in right now and why we're doing this. You know, Shannon told me we had a couple of interviews. I don't keep track of this. He keeps track of this for me because there is a gap. It's a gap in leadership, and the leadership, I want them to hold everyone accountable and do all this. And when they don't, our phones are being right. People are calling us because somebody else isn't picking up the phone. That's really why we get involved. I don't want to be the guy talking to you, to be honest.
Yeah, you sort of become like the spokesperson though. I mean, it's, you know, like you said, it seems like if you don't hold people accountable, you know, it's like in life, you know, things slip away or whatever.
For me, Kaylee would have expected me to be her father. Not 1%, not 10, not 50% of the time. Like I handed off to a judge and a prosecutor to be the father. I'm going to be her father 100% of the time. And when I tell whoever did this, you picked the wrong family, it has to be backed by action. And I'm that action. I'm that person saying, I'm going to be the voice that doesn't go away, even if both sides want that voice to go away.
Makes sense. Is there anything else, Shannon, you think is important that we didn't touch on with the statement, or just that you want to get out there going into the hearing tomorrow?
No, I mean, there's a lot of procedural things that are going on in the next couple of weeks. I think the family will be there either by Zoom or in person. I'm not sure. We'll figure that out. It's not worth it to really get them in there for 10 or 15 minutes to, like Steve said, for a whole day's worth of stuff. So, but we are, we're looking forward to some of the stuff coming up, the scheduling order, picking new trial dates, the alibi issue, the indictment stuff, all decisions on those things. The court has a lot of stuff in front of him. It has to make some decisions on. We're looking forward to those things. The cameras in the courtroom tomorrow. Sure, there'll be some oral argument on that tomorrow. I think we'll all be there by Zoom. I'll be there by Zoom. And, it's like Steve said, they become the spokespersons for the families sometimes because that's the job that they've taken on and they're willing to do it.
All right. That's basically the end of that interview. All right, I'm going to hit a couple questions and I got to get out of here. Misfit, if there's no cameras, will it be recorded? So my guess, if I'm just going to guess based on what happened in Vallow Daybell, same state, is they'll record the audio and release it the next day. Probably not during the hearings, but during the trial. Carol, did the victim's family in OJ, for example, get an opinion, consider whether cameras were in the courtroom then or any other cases? So I'd have to go look into each specific case, but I think they all should. I don't know if they did, but they should. And I know a lot of times, I'll just speak for Florida, in sentencing and taking deals and things like that, they do talk to victims' families. So they do involve victims' families a lot in the criminal process, but not for everything. And, I think it's a prosecutor by prosecutor basis. Don, Steve may be speaking about the cops and investigators. The defense is questioning everyone's experience level, right? Yeah. I mean, again, if he doesn't blatantly say it, it's hard for us to guess specifically what he's talking about without other context clues, other things that he said, other filings that have been made, things like that. Rebel Duck, I want the right outcome to prevail with or without cameras present. Do people get angry when not all trials are televised? Just saying. I agree. I think we all want the most fair process. But I think some of the arguments made as to why to remove cameras in this case are not as strong as they may seem because stuff's already out there. Memes are already happening. People are already talking. People are already convicting him. So it's not like you're calling it from the beginning of the case, which is also hard to do because we want openness and transparency. It's a difficult job for the judge to do. And I don't want to make light of that. I don't want any of my comments to seem like, oh, it's so obvious that he should put cameras in the courtroom. No, it's not obvious. He has a lot to balance, especially the party's wishes. To go against the party's wishes is very difficult for a judge. And if he allows cameras at this point, it would be against both parties' wishes, the state and the defense, not the victims, but the state and the defense. So it's a very difficult decision for Judge. So I've got to run now, but what we're going to do is we're going to link the podcast again in the comments, and we're going to pin it in the comments and in the live chat. Go check out Trial by Media. We're going to link the I think it's episode 1, which is the defendant's right to a fair trial. Listen to all of them. The most recent one was the media's right to a fair trial. Subscribe to that podcast page. Subscribe to this page. Do all the things. Hit that like button on the way out. I've got to run. Thank you guys so much. We will be talking about that Murdoch hearing at some point. So stay tuned for that. I appreciate you guys, as always, adding so much to this conversation and this content to make it more interesting. Until next time, I am out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who might be interested here on YouTube. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on all social media, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, at Lawyer You Know. But on Instagram, we are still at Tragos Law. So look us up on there. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. Of course, all of these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You